Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is a weekly update, and I know I haven't filmed in a while. I've just kind of been busy and not really felt like writing reviews. So I have 8 books to talk to you about today that I finished since last time, and like always, we'll move from the lowest to the highest rated. So before we get started, leave a dog emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. So we'll begin with some 3-star books, and the first book I'll talk about here is Nightwatch on the Hinterlands by Eason. So this is adult sci-fi mystery, and I did receive this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this came out October 19th. So this is set in the same world as the Rory Thorne series duology, which I have read. So here we have a Templar and an ambassador slash spy who team up to investigate a murder where essentially a decommissioned battle mecha is the main suspect, even though these mechas have been reprogrammed for manual labor. So I felt a bit confused about the world building, which was odd because, like I said, I have read the Rory Thorne series, and I thought I would, I don't know, be a little bit better oriented to what was going on here, but I couldn't quite tell when this takes place. I think it takes place a while after the Rory Thorne Chronicles duology, but I'm not entirely sure. And I just kind of felt confused about the different alien races and just could not keep them all straight in my mind. So I think it was decently paced, but I just wasn't super invested in the story for some reason, and perhaps it's just because I didn't particularly connect with the characters. I'm not entirely sure. I will say it does have a different writing style to Rory Thorne because it's not told in this like chronicle or kind of documenting Rory Thorne's life. So it's less of like a stream of consciousness or long-winded type style here, which I think is probably going to be a lot more readable for most people. I felt just okay about the mystery itself that we have. I did particularly like a subplot that we have with these Reeves, and these are like these battle mechas, because it's kind of like a how do you define sentience or humanity type of plot, which is something that I find really appealing in general. But generally, yeah, I felt like I was just missing something from the story and felt like a little bit disconnected from it. I didn't particularly connect to the characters like I had mentioned, and I think I connected with the characters in the Rory Thorne duology a lot more. So we have this Templar, Iari, who fought in the war, and I did like how she wants to investigate things to protect her city. We also have Geyer, who's the ambassador for the Vicari people, which are like kind of looked down upon or hated because of previous wars. So he's an arithmeter, so I really liked getting to see some of that again. That was something that I thought was really exciting in the Rory Thorne duology, where it's essentially like magic math, and you can read people's auras, and different colors like represent different emotions, and I thought that was a really interesting idea. Of course, like being into math myself, like magic math is really cool. But yeah, I mean, we don't get a ton of that here, but we do get to see it some, and I think Geyer doesn't really shy away from helping with the investigation, even though people don't necessarily welcome his help. I think this was fine, but I still prefer the first Rory Thorne book, perhaps in part because it is sort of like this fairy tale type retelling aspect, which is something that works really well for me. So I think, like, I'm kind of curious. You might be able to read this just fine without having read the Rory Thorne Chronicles. Obviously, like, I can't really speak to that because I have read the Rory Thorne Chronicles and still felt kind of confused. Yeah, but I mean, I think if you're interested in this sort of sci-fi mystery, then I would recommend checking it out. So the other 3-star book I'll talk about today is Anatomy, a Love Story. This is by Schwartz, and this is a YA historical fiction. And I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out January 18th. So this is set in Edinburgh in 1817, and we follow Hazel, who wants to be a surgeon, and we also have Jack, who's a resurrection man who digs up bodies. So Hazel is kicked out of a surgeon's classes for being female, and she ends up teaming up with Jack to get the corpses she needs in order to study for the surgeon's exam. So I mostly did enjoy this, except for the second half and the ending, and I think it just really went downhill from that point on for me, unfortunately. The pacing was good in general, though, again, the end is rushed. And I think it does have a pretty readable quality to it, though, so I did find it mostly interesting. I think the big problems that I have with this book come in with the romance and, again, this ending. Like, I thought that Hazel and Jack don't really interact that much in the first half of the book, so I didn't really feel their connection much, and like it kind of rushes through their romance in the second half of the book, which I didn't particularly enjoy. There's something revealed towards the end that just felt extremely out of place and just not really well explained or set up very well, and I think I would have just preferred for this to not exist at all. I think the prologue sets this particular type of thing up a bit, but it just doesn't really get explored at all in the book. And then I was like, where is this even coming from? So it just felt really jarring, and I was like, I don't really love that. So I did like these settings though. It certainly feels like we're immersed in this time period and location. I enjoyed seeing Hazel, try to pursue a career that's looked down upon or unheard of for a woman in this time. I think it does get pretty detailed with anatomy at times, with some sometimes gross descriptions, I guess, but I enjoyed this. I've taken anatomy classes. I think it's really interesting, so I liked that. We also do have these societal pressures for Hazel to get married, so we do have some elements of like going to balls and things like that. I think Hazel was enjoyable to follow though as a main character. She's very smart and determined to forge her own path. I liked how she would rather be a surgeon than get married. I think she's kind of been left alone by her parents after her brother's death, so she does have this freedom to study, but at the same time she's rather isolated. She seems nice overall though, and we do get to see this especially with the people who work at her family's castle. I enjoyed watching her learn things in general, and I think I would have just preferred to have the entire book focused on Hazel's journey to become a surgeon. Jack was alright, so he does come from a very different background to Hazel, but he's generally a good guy and does help Hazel out several times. I feel like he was more of a secondary character though, and I just didn't get enough time to really buy him as a romantic partner to Hazel. So we do have a few chapters from his perspective, but like I said, I much preferred Hazel and would have preferred for her just to be the main character point of view throughout. So I think, yeah, this was generally enjoyable, but there were several plot threads, like the romance and the mystery, that just weren't as developed as I'd necessarily like. But if you're interested in this historical fiction, then I would certainly say that it's worth checking out. So now I have a 3.5-star book, and that's The Deal by Elle Kennedy. So I buddy read this with Kat from Brews and Reviews, and this is an adult romance where we have Hannah, who agrees to tutor hockey star Garrett in exchange for his help catching the eye of Hannah's crush. So I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I expected, especially after not particularly enjoying Garrett's behavior in the beginning of the book. The pacing was pretty good overall, aside from some minor stumbles in the beginning, and I also advise strongly, do not read the synopsis on Goodreads or Amazon, aside from, what I've told you about, we have this fake dating premise, because it essentially mentions something that doesn't happen as early as it seems to imply, and I think that can really, throw off your sense of pacing in the book if you do know that. Thankfully, I had forgotten what had happened or what had been mentioned in the synopsis before reading it, so I wasn't terribly bothered by it, but that's definitely something that I strongly advise do not read that. So I really enjoyed this college setting and having hockey involved, even though that's not really my sport of choice. I still find it interesting, but I don't know that much about it. But I thought this was a really fun sports romance, I guess. We do have some humor, explicit sex scenes, and serious moments. There are content warnings for off-screen rape and abuse, and it does get pretty dark at times, which I didn't necessarily expect, but I generally liked how the book addressed this. I think there are some minor stumbles, but I think ultimately it is a positive, I guess, depiction of dealing with these things. Some things that, yeah, like I said, with Hannah in particular might be a bit rushed, but I liked seeing her heal a bit more. Both of them have had some terrible things happen in their past, but I liked seeing them be able to open up to each other about it. So I really liked Hannah. I thought she was very smart and hardworking, and I enjoyed that she's into music. She's actually competing in this music competition for a scholarship, and I found that plot thread to be pretty interesting. And again, it's really lovely to see her gain even more confidence. I don't entirely get her crush on the other guy, but I feel like she and Garrett did have some chemistry though. And I really liked how they were able to form a friendship, and then, their fake dating maybe isn't so fake after all. So Garrett, I think, is kind of problematic at first because he's extremely pushy with getting Hannah to tutor him, and he's very arrogant, and yeah, I mean, some of this at the beginning in particular was I don't know about this, but he does get considerably better. He's very protective, and I think he's kind of a bro type guy, so I don't always love how he acts, but ultimately I do like seeing how he becomes a lot nicer to Hannah, and he is pretty sweet sometimes. I definitely feel like they're good for each other and bring out the best in each other, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, I guess, in a romance. They both have their own goals in life and do seem to want the best for each other, so we get some really nice, fun banter between them, and it's just pretty great overall to watch their journey. There are some mild dramatic moments between them, and I think they make some not so great choices, which I don't really love, that could have just been easily resolved by talking to each other, but, you know, these things happen, I guess. So these side characters were mostly enjoyable as well. I really liked Hannah's friend, Elle in particular. She's very supportive of Hannah and looks out for her, which is really nice. We also get some of these other hockey players. Most of them were pretty entertaining, and I think the other books in this series are like romances following some of these other hockey players. Also, we do have to deal with Garrett's dad here, who is a professional hockey player, and he's just a total asshole. Did not like him at all, but yeah, I mean, overall, this is my first Elle Kennedy book, and I've heard pretty positive things about her books in general. This is also free on Amazon, and I think is still free, so I was like, I mean, sure, I'm gonna try that out. So, Kat and I are thinking about, I think, perhaps continuing this series, so I'm hopefully, you know, that'll happen. But we had a good time reading this, I think, and I would certainly recommend it if you're looking for this college sports type romance with fake dating. So now we'll move to 4-star books, and the first book I'll talk about here is Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out January 4th. So this is an adult thriller where Lux and her boyfriend are hired to sail 2 women to a remote island in the South Pacific. This Marrow Island is a paradise except for its rather gruesome history, and they find another boat anchored offshore. They do get along with these people on this other boat until someone new comes in, and cracks begin to emerge in their friendships. So I thought this was a really enjoyable thriller. I've read a few books now by Rachel Hawkins. I think this one was really great. I had a fun time with this. So I really loved this tropical island setting, especially because they actually set out from Maui, which I absolutely adore, so of course I loved that. But it was really fun to see. I think the isolated island was great because it kind of gives off a closed circle mystery type vibes. You know, they're in the middle of nowhere, where if things go wrong, they're definitely on their own. So I think this helped increase the tension levels, even though I do think that there could have been more things happening, in particular with like threats from nature. But overall, I still had a really good time with this setting. I think the pacing was great. It's very quick to read, and it kept me wanting to pick it up. It has several timelines here. It does mostly take place in the present with Lux, but it does have some like before chapters that are woven in to establish backstory for several different characters. So I liked this overall, though I will say I found the current day timeline to be much more interesting. Obviously we need to establish some backstory for our characters and like motivations and, you know, figure out how they're all connected if they are. So I liked Lux as the main character. She moved out to Maui to start a life with her boyfriend, and like their goals were to travel the world. Or at least, you know, that's what she thought. But it turns out, you know, they've had some boat problems as well as money troubles. That's kind of prevented them from doing so, but she still dreams of getting out there. I did root for her and sympathize with her with some of the situations that arise. I think she's first and foremost a survivor, and she finds hidden wells of strength, so watching her was quite fun. Her boyfriend is not the best, was not a fan of him, definitely got some sketchy vibes from him. He just kind of seems to not necessarily be the same as how he portrays himself. So that's what I'll say about that. The 2 girls that they take to this island, Emma and Brittany, are also pretty interesting. They're supposed to be great friends, but they seem to have some faults in their friendship. Both of them have some pretty good moments, but they also have ones that make them seem like there is, in fact, more to them as well. And they just are not necessarily as nice as they maybe seem. So I definitely figured out some connections between the characters pretty early on, but I still liked reading on to confirm this. I am not necessarily sure I loved the overall reveal with people's motivations, but I still had a really great time with this. I would definitely recommend it, especially, you know, if you do like these close circle type vibes. Highly recommend picking this up. And again, if you want like a fun tropical setting, also recommend picking this one up. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Cold the Night, Fast the Wolves by Meg Long. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out January 11th. So this is a YA sci-fi where 17-year-old Senna must flee from a local gangster with a prize-fighting wolf and join a team of scientists to guide them on this infamous sled race on the planet in exchange for getting off the planet. So this was quite enjoyable. I think it's perfect for the winter, especially because of the setting. It's like a very cold and inhospitable planet that helps increase the tension level, especially during the race, you know, because they're out in the elements trying to survive. We also have a lot of natural predators on this planet, including like ice goblins, giant bears, big cats, and even more. So I really liked all of these and just getting to see them and know more about them. I think the world itself is pretty interesting in general. Like, it's Definitely a lot of like this corporations versus living off the land, and these people who live off the land are called scavers, and they're like really looked down upon in society, and there's generally, I think, a lot of tension between the groups because, you know, the corporations obviously don't like them, but these scavers also won't help racers, which is like a big planet-wide event that happens every year, I think. So there's a lot of things going on here between our groups of people on planet. It's definitely a sci-fi book, though, and I thought that this was quite interesting because I kind of expected more of a, like, survival thriller, I guess, and it definitely has those aspects, but it seems like there's, you know, advanced technology, there are spaceships, there's, like, manipulating the planet's climate, genetic manipulations, and even more, and so I felt like there were some really cool ideas with this, and I did like the combination of these sci-fi elements along with survival and action elements. I thought that worked really well together. The pacing is a little bit weird because it takes almost half the book to get to the race, and I basically just thought that the race would start a lot sooner, but I did like the background information that we get starting up, you know, the first half. It is sometimes a little bit repetitive, I think, with Senna's thoughts and actions, but the actual race itself was very fast-paced and action-packed. Senna, I think, was an enjoyable main character overall. She's very tenacious and brave, though she's definitely stubborn. I did get a little bit tired of her at times, just refusing to accept help and thinking that she's alone, but it does kind of make sense given her past. Her mothers did die during the race in previous years, so she's really against having anything to do with it, but of course is like kind of reluctantly drawn in. She is just trying to survive and get enough money to get off planet, but she ends up getting involved in things and forms attachments, and I really liked getting to watch these bonds developing, especially with Iska, which is this like wolf dog creature, because yes, of course, I love a good animal companion. It's really lovely to see them both start to trust each other, and I liked the idea of these Vonin wolves and racing. It kind of gave me like a Balto vibe, I guess. So, Senna does make some rash decisions at times and must deal with both natural and human predators, but I really liked the team that she joined up with in general because, of course, you know, we've got some scientists just trying to study exocarbon, so I liked that science-y bit and, you know, how they felt very different from the other race groups who were just trying to do it for, you know, money and prestige. So, Remy, in particular, is one of the members of the group, and she's super interesting, and I definitely want to know more about her. I liked how she refuses to give up and helps Senna with her quests and, you know, just survival in general. There's also, I think, Panna, who's a doctor, and I liked how she wants to study things, but she's also, like, very practical and helpful to have around. So, in general, I really liked this and would definitely recommend it, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to get more books in this world or series, especially because it seems like there are, in fact, more planets that we could explore, so yeah, I had a really great time with this one. Definitely recommend it, especially during the winter when you know, get these fun, like, cold vibes from it. It was really fun. So if you do want some sci-fi along with survival and action elements going on here, definitely recommend picking this up. The last 4-star book I'll talk about is I Hate You More by Lucy Gilmore. So this is adult romance where Ruby, a former beauty pageant queen, agrees to show a friend's golden retriever at a dog show, but Wheezy is a lazy lump of a dog. We have Spencer, who's a vet and one of the judges of the dog show, and he advises her to quit while she can, which just reawakens Ruby's competitive nature. So I had a good time with this, and I did, like, specifically want to read it around Thanksgiving while the National Dog Show was going on, and I did, in fact, do that. So that was just super fun to have that going on. I think the pacing was good overall. I was interested the whole time and thought it moved along pretty well. It's not particularly long, so it read pretty quickly. Obviously, I loved this dog show premise and having dogs in general, though I will say the book wasn't quite as focused on the dog show itself as I necessarily expected. It's a lot more time just leading up to it, but, you know, we do get to see the actual show happen a little bit. We get to see Ruby attempt to train Wheezy and get to know Spencer and the other characters. This definitely has a good amount of humor here, particularly when it comes to Wheezy, like 10 out of 10 for Wheezy. But we do have some shenanigans and competitive moments here as well, which were pretty fun. We also have some serious moments, you know, where Ruby in particular, I think, reflects on her life some. Speaking of dogs, Samus is scratching her collar right by the camera. Thank you. So, yes, Ruby reflects on her life some and tries to figure out what she really wants to do for a career. We also have some interesting and kind of strange familial relationships, like Ruby and her mother. Her mother was her previous like beauty pageant coach, and then we have Spencer and his brother, and I think some of these are definitely strained relationships, but I think the book does deal with improving these relationships a bit more. I really liked Ruby in general. I think I can really relate to her with having a bit of a competitive nature, and I liked how, you know, she wants to prove Spencer wrong with Wheezy and show Spencer that she's more than just her looks. She does seem very kind and driven though, so she does work at a nursing home facility, and I like seeing her interact with the residents. She's very caring and does a great job with them. She's pretty involved with them, and including, you know, things like joining up an erotica book club with the residents, which I thought was highly entertaining. Hi, Samus. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Ruby can definitely be stubborn, though, and her competitive nature doesn't always let her accept help, and I think she sometimes takes things the wrong way. But she's definitely someone I rooted for. Spencer is quite grumpy, so we do have this grump and sunshine dynamic here. But he's good at heart and very sweet, so he feels a bit insecure because his brother seems to be much more likable, and, you know, I thought it was really nice seeing Ruby actually prefer Spencer to Caleb. I think this helps improve his perception of himself. He's also pretty competitive, especially with his brother, so there's some really entertaining banter between Spencer and Ruby because they do have some similar personality aspects. He's very caring, though, and again, good with animals. Obviously, though, Wheezy down here is the star of the show. He's just a derpy, ridiculous dog, and this just made me smile, especially with his antics and some of the descriptions. Like, there was one description of, like, they're trying to get him in the car or something, and it said something about, like, he was rolling around like a dropped pencil on the floor, attempting to, like, not be picked up. So I don't know, I just thought that was really funny. So he is selectively obedient, so I had a fun time watching them attempt to train him. I also enjoyed several of the side characters, like Wheezy's owner and one of the other judges of the competition. So this does have some explicit sex scenes, just FYI, but I thought the romance itself was pretty enjoyable, and I do like them together. So I had fun with this. I would definitely read more from this author. In fact, I've been looking today at buying more books because they all seem to have dog elements with that, and I'm like, yes, I need romance with having dogs around, yes. So yeah, if you're looking for a cute romance that does deal with dogs and like this competitive nature, I would recommend picking this up. So now we'll jump up to the 5-star books, and the first one I'll talk about here is The Love Hypothesis by Elle Hazelwood. So I buddy read this with Kat from Booze and Reviews, and this is an adult romance following Olive, who's a third-year PhD candidate, and she's trying to convince her best friend that she's in a relationship and happy, and she ends up panic-kissing Adam, who's a young hotshot professor and well-known ass. So Olive is very surprised when Adam agrees to this fake dating charade, and again, when he turns out to not be so bad after all. So I loved just like everything about this. It was wonderful. I think Kat and I had such a great time reading this together, and we actually had to, like, we usually do our buddy reads, like reading a certain number of chapters per day, and we actually had to increase our pace because we were both like, we need to know what happens. We just have to keep reading. So obviously the pacing is excellent. It's very addicting, and we had to know where it was headed. I thought this was quite amusing at times. You know, there's humor plus some more serious topics dealing with issues that women in STEM fields can face. I really appreciated this blend of humor and these tough topics, especially, you know, just bringing attention to some of these things. I also loved how realistic it felt, especially with the science bits and just what it's like to be in grad school. Obviously, like, I really connected with that aspect. There's obviously some variance in what a particular program demands or is like with the atmosphere, but I think there's a lot of overlap in general, especially with how it makes you feel. And I really loved seeing this, you know, grad school experience portrayed in the book because I felt like it did actually capture a lot of my own experiences. I did have a guess as to what the major issue of the book would be, but I was actually wrong about it. What happened was worse in different ways, I guess, than what I had anticipated, so that was kind of interesting to see. In terms of the characters, I loved Olive. I feel like I could really relate to her, especially, you know, with some of the social anxiety and just her behavior in general. I like her motivations behind getting a PhD and getting to see her do some research. Like, it was just, oh my god, it was so good. Again, just being a grad student, I think that really helped me see myself in her, and that helped me, like, really connect with this book. So I felt bad for her because she's kind of isolated herself. Again, I think this is relevant to grad school because a lot of times you do feel alone. But I think she's really kind, and she just wants her friends to be happy, and, like, there is some element of lying to them about, you know, dating Adam, but I wasn't really bothered by this, I guess, because I think her heart was in the right place, and she just wants her friend to be happy and not, like, feel awkward about dating somebody. So Olive is just so funny and smart, and I wanted to see her succeed and be able to get with Adam. She seems to be demisexual, I think, so it's really great to see her feel comfortable enough with Adam, and I just thought their relationship was so great. I really felt the chemistry, and I loved how protective Adam is of her, and like how he just wants to help her and see her succeed. We definitely, again, have this Grump and Sunshine dynamic. Apparently, we're into, like, the Grump and Sunshine and, like, fake dating stuff in this particular wrap-up, but, you know, whatever. I also thought it was highly amusing how Olive actually brings up some rom-com tropes and how Adam has, like, no clue what she's talking about. It's also fun to see, like, which tropes are set up and then to see, like, do they happen or do they not. Also, just, like, as a side note, I think this started off as Raylo fanfiction, which I find just, like, highly entertaining. Anyway, so Adam is definitely a grump, and he's pretty gruff and kind of a jerk to his students, but he has his reasons. I love seeing him bend a bit with this, though, after Olive talks to him about it. I think he wants the best from and for his students, and he's also very motivated and intelligent. I love seeing him relax a bit, especially around Olive. You know, he laughs around her. So I think they, again, bring out the best in each other. So I just love this so much, and I will read whatever Allie Hazelwood writes next. I think there are 3 interconnected novellas coming out next year, and then, like, a full-length book as well. So, like, definitely getting all of those. So obviously I had a wonderful time with this. Highly recommend it. Oh my god, it was just wonderful. Yep. Yep. It was just great. Read this book. So the last book I'll talk about today is obviously another 5-star book, and that's The Dark Archive by Genevieve Cogman. So this is adult urban fantasy, and this is book 7 in the Invisible Library series. And this essentially deals with this library that tries to collect unique written works from different, like, alternate worlds to, like, stabilize them and whatnot. And then we have, like, fae and dragons, and that each world can kind of lean more into chaos or logic or order. So here we have Irene, who's our main character. So she now has a fae assistant and is trying to train her to be a librarian. After several assassination attempts, Irene and her friends must investigate the threat and face an old enemy. So this was another great installment of the series. I'm not surprised that I love this because I've had such a wonderful time with the series in general. This is, interestingly enough, less about getting a particular book for the library like previous books have kind of been focused on, and this is actually more about dealing with the treaty and other big plots. So it was a bit of a change of pace here, but I really enjoyed it. The pacing is great again. I thought, you know, it moved pretty quickly, it kept me wanting to read. We do have quite a bit of action here with several assassination attempts and, you know, running around and investigating and all of this worked really well to keep things very exciting. It's mostly set on Vale's world, and this is essentially like a Sherlock Holmes type setting, I guess. But we do have some other worlds as well, and some of these could have dire consequences. I liked getting to see Vale's world again, though, because we do have creatures like werewolves, but we also have fae and dragons who can both be on this world pretty comfortably because it doesn't lean too heavily into either chaos or logic or order. I don't remember if it's logic or order. One of those two. Hopefully you know what I mean. There's definitely some implications for things moving forward, and I'm just like dying to know more about them. I continue to like the magic that we get with the library. It's essentially like magic words and speech that compels people and things, and I love how clever Irene is at using it, and just generally like the nuances with specifying what you have to say in order to have the effects that you want. I also continue to love having both the fae and the dragons. It's still really intriguing to me how the fae play into different archetypes, and we do get to see new options with this. So what's interesting about that is, like, you know, if you have a pretty strong fae, then they lean more into a particular archetype, and, you know, like a criminal mastermind or something like that. Like, it's very much like the Professor, like, Moriarty type of character. So the dragons are still dealing with some things we learned previously that does somewhat affect how our characters perceive some of the older dragons in particular, which is pretty interesting. In terms of her characters, I think Irene continues to be great. She's pretty no-nonsense, but I think she's very clever and protective of her friends and allies. We learned some things here about her that I didn't necessarily expect, but I'm very intrigued by. I also think it's like highly entertaining to have her be a mentor to Catherine, who's Fae, because Catherine acts in some ways like Irene, and it's almost like getting like a taste of what it was like for Irene's parents and mentors to raise her. So I think Irene does gain some sympathy for them for this. Having Catherine here is great because it's really like the first time a Fae has tried to become a librarian. And so I think there's a lot of like unprecedented times for them, especially with like how to actually get her into the library. Catherine is pretty young and does make some mistakes sometimes, but she seems to be willing to learn and adapt, you know, over the book. Kai returns again, and he's still great, though we don't get to see him quite as much here. But I love how trusting he is of Irene, and just their bond in general is really great. We see some characters from previous books again, and I'm not going to mention who, but I really enjoyed this because it has some interesting potentials for the future. So I can't wait for the next one, which actually comes out late December here, so I can't wait to see where this goes. But I definitely recommend this series, especially if you enjoy urban fantasy and like books about books. I just think that this has been such a fun time. I like getting to see the alternate worlds and like unique works of art, and like the Fae and the dragons are also great. So obviously I really like the series, and like I said, I would definitely recommend it. So with that, those are all the books that I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of them or think you might pick them up. For your question of the day, I'm like kind of blanking on stuff, so do you like books that take place in academic settings? Obviously I read a couple here with, you know, the romance books, but I do enjoy a good academia setting in general. So yeah, I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.